been a colleague of Curtis's for 36 years. We want to welcome Curtis and Julie to this ultimate event.
Thank you.
We're so thrilled that we could be here with you. We want to welcome your family. Rosalie Lynn, Curtis's mother, who has traveled here from Beaufort, South Carolina. And the other family members who have come from Hardyville and Beaufort and Atlanta: Melvin McCarthy Sr., Melvin McCarthy Jr., Vincenzo Chaplin, Monica Rutledge. We are so thrilled you are here with us today. And we really hope that you take as much pride as we do in the accomplishments and contributions that Curtis has made to this college and this university and this country. To the scholarship on American Black radical political thought and politics, and on generations of political activists and thinkers, some of whom are among us. I'd like to introduce the people who helped to organize this program. First of all, Herman Maribel, a native of graduate of James Madison College, class of 1984, where he majored in urban policy studies. This is an incredibly accomplished guy, but I want to speak about one of his most transformative contributions and accomplishments, which is the role that he played in bringing Curtis Stokes to James Madison College. I was on this faculty for 5 years before I think we even interviewed black faculty. Students spent years mobilizing and pressuring the college. And in 1982, after years of concern about the absence of black faculty in the college, Herman was part of a coalition of students to press the college and the university, and ultimately the Board of Trustees, to enact a national search for black teacher scholars who would be interested in joining this part of the course. He gave an eloquent statement before the Board of Trustees, and the result was a series of exceptional candidates. And I know some old faculty here brought in other exceptional candidates. And ultimately, the hiring of a man who wrote his dissertation on the permanent revolutionary thought of Leon Trotsky. This was a transformative moment in James Madison. More you'll hear about from all the speakers. Herman has served as a district judge for nearly 2 decades. First in the 68th district and since 2016 in the
67 of the fourth state.
Yeah. He earned his JD degree at Ohio State University College of Law, and before taking the bench, he had a whole slew of legal experiences as an assistant district attorney in Pittsburgh, a law clerk at the UAW, an extraordinary rich life. He belongs to many bar associations and legal organizations. I'm not going to list them all, but I want to point out, and numerous honors, as would any of your great students. But I want to talk about 2 that I think really speak to the legacy of Curtis Stokes. And one is the Judge Maribel Student of the Month and Year program that he runs in Flint, which encourages high school students to focus on education and career goals. And every month, a student is highlighted on his website. And I think many of them have ended up here.
You know what? We've got one right there in the audience. It's a James Madison alum. Sharice Lee.
Curtis, this speaks But Herman also speaks to your future because he has also instituted the Herman Senior and Iris Marable Senior Citizen of the Month Award to recognize persons over the age of 60 who have dedicated themselves to community service. So thank you for that.
Okay, so I do have prepared remarks, and I think I'm going to mostly go with them. KDC, some of you, especially some of the students, may not know who KDC is, but she is a retired professor emerita from James Madison College. Retirement? She taught in what is now called social relations and policy. I think when I was there, it was minority-majority group relations. And she helped to create the field of comparative culture and politics. She had a rich scholarly career, and she was very much devoted to teaching exceptional people who were undergrads in this college. She mentored young faculty, and of course, her study and teaching of the dynamics of race, class, and gender in national and comparative contexts. She and our honoree tonight team taught in the public affairs course, and she certainly was involved with Curtis in terms of advocating for redressing the racial climate at James Madison College. He's giving me the thumbs up, right?
I did.
Okay. In her retirement, she has been very active in the community to address gun violence. And in fact, you were at a march yesterday here in Lansing, a march against gun violence. And she is working with the Truth and Racial Healing and Transformation Team, Greater Lansing, in their efforts to address the causes and consequences of racial segregation. So, okay.
Kendra, where are you?
Maybe she's not here.
Not here yet.
Well, we'll have to wait. We'll wait for that.
Okay, so we'll say later something about how we organize this event
Okay.
before we introduce, but for now.
Well, no, one more thing. Now, I assume, since you're retired, you're going to teach Curtis Stokes how to be retired. Is that right?
I'm not sure I ever taught Curtis Stokes anything. But I'm going to share some insights.
Wonderful. Okay, so I think it might be time for dinner to be served.
So we'll be back at dessert time for the sweetest part.
Wow.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have a message from Sherman Garnett, Dean of James Madison College for the last 20 years. Video. It's a very colorful speech he's giving you.
Are we saying something else? Somebody has a Mac.
Please stand by.
Welcome to my backyard. I'm very sorry I can't be at this special celebration for Stokes' amazing career. In fact, probably the only thing that would keep me away is the birth of my first grandchild. I did want to be present at this celebration, even if only virtually, to say congratulations to Professor Stokes and to join with all the others in celebrating his amazing career and the impact it's had on James Madison College, on Michigan State University, and me personally. I've been dean for 20 years, and I can't tell you the number of times I've talked to former students of Professor Stokes's, especially African American alums, and especially that first class that was there when Curtis walked into the college and changed all of our lives. I've heard this from Judge Marable. I've heard it from so many alumni that made such a difference to the college, brought new subject matters and perspectives to us, and in fact started us down the road to a change in the composition and the perspectives of the faculty that I think has resulted in the very strong faculty we have today. The most important thing that I learned quite early on was that not only was Professor Stokes important to the college, but he had his hand literally in almost everything related to African American studies, race, diversity, issues of social justice on the campus itself. And I quickly learned as we reviewed people's cases every year for promotion and tenure and for salary raises, that he was involved in every search. He was involved in items for consideration by the provost and the president. And especially, he was involved in starting the race conference with a group that got a big outside grant, but then turned this into something that has lasted 20 years. And I understand also that the books from that conference will be on display on Saturday, but it's such an important legacy to the university. The second very related thing is Curtis was one of the founders of the AAAS, the African American and African Studies program that began as a doctorate and is now becoming a full department. He was the first director. He was key to defining the curriculum, putting together the coalition, a lasting impact on the entire university. Spent some time talking about his importance to Madison College, especially his development of a special set of courses on Black politics, African American political thought, and his unique take on a set of political theory courses that really changed the views of generations of students, not only those inclined towards Professor Stokes' critique of American society, but even those who didn't agree with it, that thought that experience in his class had been so important to their understanding of themselves, American society, and even what they wanted to do with their lives. That's the essence of the Madison mission. I don't think there's anybody who did that better. I also do want to point out that anytime we had an issue related to how people ought to treat one another, whether it was racial in nature, ethnic, or simply just human interaction, Professor Stokes was there, both formally on many of the major committees, including the 2 racial climate studies we've done while I've been dean, but also in the background, advising different faculty and coming to my office and others in the college as well to give his perspective and time. I think we're a better college because of that work, and especially that work in the classroom and outside the classroom. I want to say just a couple of personal words. It's been so important to me to have a relationship for nearly 2 decades with Professor Stokes, with Curtis. He was the first faculty member that invited me into his class, and I got to see firsthand the kind of enthusiasm of students and his own teaching, that great dialogue that made such a difference to their lives. He also told me I had to bring the pizza. The second thing is, as I alluded to earlier, when we talked about the most serious things in the college, especially how we treat one another, he'd come into my office, he'd be extremely serious, but also wanting to reach some solution, maybe, again, like a teacher wanting to teach me to do my job better. But I so appreciate that, and I so appreciate our 20 years together. I think it's made a huge difference in the college. I I think it's pointing to a direction that we will continue to go and try to get better on. And I think we owe so much of that to you, Curtis, so congratulations, and really enjoy this night.
Thank you. So, gratitude to Sharon Garnett while his daughter is giving birth, to be present virtually with you, Chris. It's great. I also wanted, on behalf of the Dean's Office, to acknowledge those who put the program together for the last 3 days, and particularly those who are not mentioned on the program. Kendra Howard and Herman Maribel and I worked with Justin Burkett to envision what it would mean to honor Curtis, and boy, was that fun. And we communicated with many of you, and it's just great to see you here today. But there are lots of people behind the stage. Sam Troutman, are you here, Sam? Yeah, thank you. She created the flyers and the program. You all got emails. I don't know whether it was, I don't know if your name was on them, but you heard from her. And she photographed us at Thursday and then today, and are you still doing it? Yep. Thank you. Rocky. Well. Thank you, Rocky, who was instrumental in helping to shape the endowment. Tonight's dinner is about Curtis's past and his legacy. And this is about developing the footprint further. And so Herman and I will talk a little bit about that endowment as we go forward. But he really contacted people, and he's really helped us generate support for this endowment, which we will think will continue Curtis's transformative role. We have to continue it. Transformation is a constant process. You are such a leader, Curtis. Your spirit will continue, but we need lots of bodies to keep this going, and lots of money. Amber Benton, are you here? Amber is the Director of Diversity and Student Engagement, so she made it sure that students could participate in all of the events, including tonight's dinner, and helped us find volunteers who helped us do the logistics, so thank you, thank you. And now we're moving toward the set of non-virtual speakers. And I'd like to begin with somebody who is not on the program, but who is the most, just a pivotal voice here. If you were, because many people here were not at Thursday's event, which was much more oriented toward current students and faculty. A.J. Rice is a visiting instructor at James Madison College, and he spoke on Thursday afternoon about Curtis's life and his legacy and his own experience as somebody who stood at a pivotal moment in that. And so we listened to him and we said, AJ, you need to be here tonight. Well, he's going to be here anyway, but we need to hear from you tonight. He's an interdisciplinary scholar of Black politics and global urban studies and American political economy. He's completing his PhD in the Department of American and African Studies, which Curtis helped develop here at MSU. Curtis recruited him to the college, so powerful connections. He's finishing his dissertation on what, to me, is just an amazing topic called manufacturing failure. Manufacturing, producing failure, race revitalization, and the takeover of Detroit's public schools. I know this is resonating with a lot of people here. It explores how the production of and resistance to the public school crisis in Detroit is linked to gentrification and racial banishment. I think this is your concept, racial banishment. Really brilliant. He has a forthcoming article in Souls, a critical journal of Black politics, culture, and society, entitled Political Economy and the Tradition of Black Political Study. I don't think any voice could be more well situated to transition to tonight. AJ.
It's hard to follow an introduction like that, so I hope I don't let anybody down, Professor Stokes. First, I want to thank Professor C and Judge Marable for allowing me this opportunity to speak. I also want to just give a little shout out to Professor Ananya Roy at UCLA, because she is actually the one that come up with this concept of racial banishment to help me kind of think through some of my work as well. Now, when Justin Burkett asked me to provide a few remarks about Dr. Curtis Stokes, I immediately seized the opportunity. It's not only rare that one has the chance to say a few words in a forum like this about someone they deeply respect and admire, but a critical opportunity in this case to celebrate and reflect on a life and career which continues to be dedicated to the advancement of African American studies, the liberation of Black people, and a radical conception of freedom. So in that sense, I thank Justin and the committee for offering me this profound honor and opportunity. I would like to begin my remarks with a brief reflection about my own personal experience with Dr. Stokes. Now, when I was an undergraduate student here in the James Madison College, I never took a formal class with Dr. Stokes. It wasn't until I enrolled in the African American and African Studies PhD program here at Michigan State University that I took full advantage of the opportunity to study under him. However, I do remember meeting with Professor Stokes numerous times as an undergraduate student, talking about my courses and at times Black politics in the U.S., and I guess I should add also just about being a Black student in Madison and the challenges that were associated with that. In fact, I remember an impromptu meeting with Stokes during my senior year in the hallway of Case. Now, to be sure, as a genius, erudite, trailblazing young, undergraduate student with an IQ of probably about 200, I, of course, knew pretty much everything there was to know about African American politics, past and present, right at the age of 20. But nevertheless, I went to Stokes and asked him some broad, assumption-laden question about contemporary Black leadership. He paused, looked at me with those eyes of a professor who is about to destroy everything he said. Some students in the audience, I'd be giving you those eyes too. And simply asked me, young brother, what do you mean by Black leaders? So after I finished stuttering and providing some incoherent answer, he invited me into his office, and after talking about so-called leaders, from Bill Cosby to Black elected officials to Malcolm X, he introduced me to a provocative and insightful book titled We Have No Leaders by Robert C. Smith, one of the people who he has invited several times to the race conference. From this experience, I distinctly remember walking away fascinated, intellectually curious, and of course, with a better appreciation of the richness and complexity of Black political thought and struggle. That moment was central in guiding me on a path that I've continued to travel today. Now, Dr. Stokes is a pioneer in African American studies, is a professor in the James Madison College of Political Theory and Constitutional Democracy. He has published numerous books, including The Evolution of Trotsky's Theory of Revolution, The State of Black Michigan, 1967 to 2007, Race and Human Rights, and most recently, Malcolm X's Michigan Worldview, an exemplar for contemporary Black studies. We also have, he also has a forthcoming book co-published with Lynn O. Scott titled Race in the Criminal Justice System. And of course, the biennial national conference, Race in the 21st Century America, which celebrated its 11th meeting this year, was itself the brainchild of Dr. Stokes, which Madison College has sponsored since its inception. This conference, just one of Dr. Stokes' signature achievements, has fostered the development and enrichment of African American political thought, facilitating debates and speeches from Black studies scholars across the political spectrum, including Manning Marable, Patricia Hill Collins, Malefi Asante, Julianne Malveaux, Charles Mills, Robert C. Smith, Darlene Clark Hine, who is also in the room today, Naeem Akbar, Robert Bullard. It was mentioned earlier, Michelle Alexander was one of the folks he's brought, as well as MSU faculty, graduate students, and undergraduate students. For those of you who might not know, Dr. Stokes grew up in the Jim Crow South, in Beaufort, South Carolina, where in his earlier days, he worked, among other places, at a drive-in movie theater, picked tomatoes, and eventually joined the military. Sorry, I did. Now, in 1968, when Dr. Stokes was still serving in the military, that was the year that Dr. Martin Luther King was assassinated. During an interview with Dr. Stokes a few years ago, he explained that this became an important turning point in his life. As a result, he started to read more about U.S. and black politics and began his pursuit of higher education, enrolling at St. Mary's University in San Antonio, Texas in the 1960s. It was here where Stokes' activism on behalf of black folks blossomed, eventually becoming the vice president of student government, running the Black Student Union, and criticizing President Richard Nixon in the Rattler, the university's student newspaper. While at St. Mary's University, Dr. Stokes was recruited by Cedric Robinson to join the political science department at the University of Michigan. Those of you who might not know, Cedric Robinson, who recently transitioned to be with the ancestors in June of 2016, is a towering figure in black political thought and one of the most important black radical theorists of the 20th century, and of course, the author of the classic book, Black Marxism. While at U of M, Professor Stokes would have the opportunity to work under Cedric Robinson as his research assistant, as well as Harold Cruz, author of the famous book, The Crisis of the Negro Intellectual, and was responsible for organizing a semester-long seminar with visiting scholars that included Detroit activists James and Grace Lee Boggs, as well as C.L.R. James, the Trinidadian historian and socialist, whose book, The Black Jacobins, continues to be standard reading for any serious student of modern black, U.S., or world history. Is that right, Davo?
Sure.
In fact, Professor Stokes once told me about a meeting he had with C.L.R. James, who was living in a small apartment on State Street in Ann Arbor, recalling James pointing a finger at Stokes while providing him with what we in the black community like to call a loving critique, correcting his understanding of certain aspects of black politics. Now, while at U of M, Stokes also became involved with BAM, or the Black Action Movement, and was part of the student activists who took over the administration building to demand improvement in the recruitment and campus conditions of black students, faculty, and staff. Seems to be a recurring theme. These years at U of M were formative for Professor Stokes and would influence his academic development and future pursuits. Dr. Stokes joined the James Madison College at Michigan State University in 1983, but because of his scholarship and political background, was later asked to serve as the founding assistant director of IRAS, the Institute for Research in African American Studies at Columbia University, by its founding director, Manning Marable. Stokes played a central role in the early development of IRAS, and once shared that when looking for housing in New York City, Manning Marable moved out of the first floor of his own home so that Stokes could live there while working at the Institute. Who lived above Stokes in that same house? The very person who made him a little bit nervous during his first interview for the IRAS position, the famed historian Eric Foner. In fact, it was while Stokes was at Columbia that he first met our very own university distinguished professor and a sociolinguist, Dr. Geneva Smitherman, who's also in the room, where they not only developed a long and lasting friendship, of course, but became comrades in the struggle to institutionalize black studies across the nation. In an interview series titled Voices from the Vineyard, Black Struggle in the Founding of African American and African Studies at Michigan State University, organized by the Sankofa Graduate Student Union and the now Department of African American and African Studies, Dr. Stokes recalled returning to MSU energized after his time in New York, anxious to set up a Black Studies program here. In that effort, Dr. Lee June, the former Vice President of Student Affairs at MSU, is Dr. June here? I know he was here earlier. Dr. June was one of the first people he spoke to about establishing this program, and Professor Stokes recalls that in the pursuit of Black Studies here at MSU, quote, Dr. Lee June has always had my back. Stokes would then bring together the most famous Black Studies scholars to ever pass through this institution. Dr. Geneva Smitherman, Darlene Clark Hine, Bill Lawson, and Harriet McAdoo to found the university's Black Studies doctoral program. Now, during his interview, Stokes, with his trademark sense of humor, recounted his efforts to set up this program, remarking that amongst all these intellectual giants that I just mentioned, he was the junior faculty member. And as such, he tells the audience he was going around campus, knocking on doors, calling folks, and trying to drum up support for the Black Studies doctoral program. So as he explains, he says, I'm sitting there at junior faculty, running around, knocking on doors, taking calls. It's like, we got all these smart people in the room, and they're not doing nothing. Having me running around making all these connections. But of course, the efforts of the founders were indeed collective. Not only collective, but successful in bringing about the state's first PhD program in Black Studies in 2002. And for his vision and work, Dr. Stokes was tapped to be to lead that new program as its founding director. In fact, a few years before the AAAS program was officially founded in 2002, Curtis and others, including Dr. Hine, had established the Midwest Consortium for Black Studies, successfully, and this is what Dean Garnett was referring to, successfully securing a $600,000 grant, over $500,000, from the Ford Foundation to help set up Black Studies at the University of Michigan, University of Wisconsin, Madison, Carnegie Mellon University, and eventually Wayne State University as well. Stokes was also involved in setting up the Malcolm X essay writing project and has trained hundreds of students over the years, including Professor Kyle T. Mays, who's with us today, now in the Department of African American Studies at UCLA, and our very own University Distinguished Professor of History, Pero Dagbovi, who's going to be speaking as well. Of course, there's much more to say. I'm sweating a little bit, and I already know I'm over time. But therefore, let me conclude by stating that what should already be clear. Dr. Stokes has deeply affected my life and scholarship, and the lives of numerous scholars for the better. If you were here earlier for the luncheon panel, the student panel, the alumni panel, you obviously got a strong sense of that. I want to thank Dr. Stokes for his tireless contributions to Black people and to the advancement of humankind more generally. I think we're all better people for knowing him, and I just want to congratulate him on all of his successes, past, present, and of course, future. Thanks, Dr. Stokes. You are a living manifestation of Black radicalism. I appreciate you, and I'm humbled by this opportunity to celebrate you. Let me just add, you're my guy.
How are you feeling?
Good.
All right. I'm talking to Professor Stokes. I'm going to say that many times. How you feeling? Ladies and gentlemen, but I think I'm mostly talking to the gentlemen right now. Some of you actually do have neckties on. Is that true? Well, I am going to invite all of you to remove your necktie, because Curtis Stokes, first time we ever saw him, was not wearing a necktie. I've never seen him in a necktie. I don't know if he actually owns a necktie. And in honor of our honoree, I'm wearing blue jeans, boots, and I'm wearing an open top. I'm not kidding. And you can take your ties off, right? Yeah, you guys think I'm joking with you. Take them off. Take them right on off. There you go. Let me say this. Those of us who, are forced to wear these probably didn't learn one of the lessons that I guess I learned from Curtis Stokes. And that is, you don't have to be wearing a necktie to say something important. speaker is Pero Godlo Dagbo, and he is a University Distinguished Professor of History and the Associate Dean of the Graduate School. He has a breathtaking scope of teaching and research interests, from Black intellectual history to the history of Black enterprise, from the civil rights to the Black Power movement to the history of hip-hop. He's published numerous books on Black history, including most recently, Reclaiming the Black Past, the use and misuse of African American history in the 21st century. He's been involved in public history and African American history educational programs, serving as a scholar consultant for the permanent exhibit at the Charles H. Wright Museum of African American History down in Detroit. And he has served as the principal investigator for the Carter G. Woodson home in Washington, D.C. Those of you who know Carter G. Woodson, Black History Month, right? Okay. You got Curtis Stokes, right? So you know this. And he mentors graduate students in the Department of History and African American Studies PhD program. For tonight's purposes, he was a student of Professor Stokes and has been a colleague and a contributing member, or contributing a chapter on affirmative action on the volume that Professor Stokes edited on race and human rights. So at this time, coming up, Professor Dagbo.
Well, Grant, thank you very much for that very formal introduction, and I'm not going to take my necktie off. I'm going to keep it on, and I know that Professor Stokes would appreciate that. So good evening, everyone. Good evening. It is truly a great honor and pleasure to have been asked to offer some brief reflections about Dr. Curtis Stokes at this wonderful event. I've known Professor Stokes for close to 3 decades. I first met him after I transferred to Michigan State University as an undergraduate student and enrolled in James Madison College back in the day. Though I soon changed my major from international relations and public policy to history, Dr. Stokes profoundly shaped my early development and worldview as a scholar and as a historian. I'll never forget all the things he's done for me, and particularly the classes that I took from him. In his African American political thought class, MC 372, that was as much a Black intellectual history course as it was a seminar in Black political theory, Stokes introduced me to the thought of W.E.B. Du Bois, Malcolm X, Amilcar Cabral, Frantz Fanon, Oba Tashaka, and Marimba Ani, amongst many others. He even required us to read Harold Cruz's exhaustive The Crisis of the Negro Intellectual that Mr. Rice referred to, a work that I know I didn't understand at the time, and I probably didn't understand fully until reading it as a professional scholar. For this class, he also required us to practice Black economic nationalism. That is, he only ordered the books from a bookstore called the Revealers of Hidden Truth Bookstore. I don't know if y'all know about that. That's kind of old school. A Black-owned bookstore in Lansing at the time that was owned and operated by MSU alum Eric Ellison. I.e., he didn't order the books at the MSU bookstore. He said, you gotta go buy Black. Now looking back at this, I'm impressed by this course for many reasons, in particular because Dr. Stokes, he treated us sort of as colleagues. Now, while he certainly dominated many of the conversations, as we all know how much Professor Stokes likes to talk, he schooled us a lot, but he did make us feel as if we had something of value to offer. And I don't know if he meant it at the time, but he made me feel like I was smart. And that meant a lot to me. I also recall how in 1992 he essentially created a course because of what was taking place on the national political scene. In particular, he assembled a group of about 5 of us black students in James Madison and initiated a course that we all took independent studies for on the now famous Anita Hill, Clarence Thomas controversy that began in late 1991. You remember that?
I do.
Okay, good. I remember that our major required reading for this class was a book called Racing Justice, Engendering Power, Essays on Anita Hill, Clarence Thomas, and the Construction of Social Reality, edited by the late Toni Morrison. And he taught this course as an overload at the time. He had his full course load, but he decided to initiate this course. He taught as an overload, not to boost his own reputation as a scholar, but to ensure that we students, those of us who are coming of age, trying to figure out life, knew what was going on and how black men and women were being portrayed in U.S. politics and popular culture. Now, without the benefit of email, right now I marvel at how he was able to coordinate this class in such an efficient and organized manner that he did. Fast forward about 20 years to the beginning of my career as a professionally trained scholar. After a 3-year teaching stint as an assistant professor at Wayne State University in Detroit, I began my career as assistant professor at Michigan State University in the Department of History. And in 2003, Dr. Stokes recruited me, at least that is how I perceived it at the time, to teach one of the introductory courses in African American and African Studies PhD program that he had co-founded and directed. Now, as I alluded to, this so-called invitation did have its parameters and criteria. Old school in his orientation, Dr. Stokes required me to formally apply to teach this course that he invited me to teach by submitting a detailed and annotated syllabus, a syllabus that he required that I do and that he provided ample critical feedback on. Among other things I remember, he insisted that I not only address the various realities of the black experience in all of its complexity and give at least a nod to Cedric Robinson's opus, but that I also acknowledge the diverse approaches and potential of black studies. I ended up teaching the course nearly a dozen times, and I know that my Africana study pedagogy skills benefited from Professor Stokes' counsel. Stokes soon became one of my mentors as a junior scholar, and several of those other mentors are in the house here today. University Distinguished Professor Geneva Smitherman and Hannah Professor Darlene Clark-Hine. Along with them, Stokes became one of my mentors, sharing with me advice about how to go about navigating MSU and the professoriate as a black man. For the last decade or so, I have truly enjoyed meeting with Professor Stokes for lunch at what he calls our watering hole, Woody's Oasis. And before this, we actually used to go to that one all-you-could-eat Chinese buffet over by Trowbridge. That was wonderful. And he would get the pigs in a blanket, I remember sometimes. Now, after each of these encounters, I learned a bit more about a humble man who I think keeps his cards close to his chest. Quote, payroll, end quote, he habitually remarks before dropping something on me. During each of our groundings, he also shares with me a new publication in African American history or black studies that he recommends that I check out. Dr. Stokes clearly takes great pride in the countless students he has taught and mentored. Yet he should also be proud of how he has been able to balance a commitment to teaching with producing scholarship. As Mr. Rice had noted, he has routinely edited provocative volumes based upon the annual or biannual race conference here at Michigan State, and he doesn't seem to show any intentions of stopping with the scholarship. He just, for instance, as was mentioned, published a book on incarceration in Michigan. Further, the books that he ushered through publication in the Black, American, and Diasporic Studies book series with MSU Press will have a secure place in Africana Studies scholarship. Now, the department's status that African American and African Studies now enjoys is without a doubt certainly a byproduct of Professor Stokes' and his colleagues here with us unwavering commitment and penchant for mobilizing his colleagues as the founding director of AAAS nearly 20 years ago. And not many people would probably realize or acknowledge this today, mainly because I think you all will agree with me, Dr. Stokes is not like that. He doesn't sing his own praises. We're here to do that today. He's a very humble man. I know that I'm not alone in expressing thanks and hearty congratulations to Dr. Curtis Stokes for his investment in the lives of generations of Spartans and the broader MSU educational community, as well as his contributions to the scientific study of African American politics, thought, and culture here at Michigan State University. I definitely know what he's done for me over the years, and Professor Stokes, I hope that you know how much I appreciate you. The endowment in his honor to promote the study of Black political thought is truly a fitting gesture to honor just such a wonderful and humble person and man. Thank you for allowing me to share my thoughts this evening. And once again, Professor Stokes, thank you for everything that you've done for me and many others.
Thank you.
Wow, thank you, Harold. This is an unusual set of qualities, this combination of humility and ferocity. And of course, we see who we are in our students. And we see how we become in our relationships with our colleagues and those with whom we collaborate to do transformative work. So our next speaker is a powerful colleague of Curtis, Darlene Clark Hine, the John A. Hanna Distinguished Professor at MSU, one of the preeminent historians of the African American experience, a key founder of the field of Black women's history, and a pioneer in exploring the intersections of race, class, and gender. This is another transformative voice. When you think about the people who put together the Black Studies program at MSU, and by the way, this is the first program in the Midwest. So those of us who came from the coast, this is such a powerful, transformative program. Professor Hine is the author of path-breaking books From Black Women in White, Examining Racial Conflict and Cooperation in American Nursing, a book whose influence I read over and over again outside of history. I just read a journalist account of race relations among nurses and prisoners of war in Arizona in the mid-century, and there was Darlene Clark. You know, you just can't pick up a really interesting book about Black women's history that isn't infused with her voice. To Black Europe and the African diaspora, to multiple editions of the African American Odyssey. It's not surprising that she has received numerous fellowships and foundation grants. She served as the president of the Organization of American Historians. She was honored by President Obama for her path-breaking work with the National Humanities Medal. She was inducted into the prestigious American Academy of Arts and Sciences 6 honorary doctorates, including from this institution. So good that you are recognized by this. She established the Comparative Black History program And since then, of Curtis and other visionary faculty, like Anita Smith and the PhD program. And you can see the legacy in the voices you've heard tonight. So this is a legacy of Madison, this is a legacy at MSU, this is a legacy in the nation, and here is a collaborative voice in that voice.
Gracious introduction. Gracious and generous. Hello, everybody. Hello. You know, it is bittersweet to be here to talk about Curtis and yet to realize that he may not be here tomorrow or the next day or the next month when you need to call him and ask him questions about race and scholarship in America. But I do recognize that change comes. You have to move on. So for just one moment, I'm speaking to you, and I'm reading some notes here, and I'm letting you know how much I have genuinely treasured our friendship, our intellectual collaboration, your wisdom, your humor, also, although sometimes I didn't get the joke. Just being honest. But there were some conversations that I will forever treasure. So I was looking through my stuff, and I have a lot of stuff, and I found some clippings that I kept that pertain to you. And so I thought I'd just share some of the things that you have done. On November 20th, 2000, MSU wrote, the newspaper, MSU receives a grant for African American Studies. Michigan State University is one of 4 universities that will share $600,000 from the Ford Foundation to strengthen the programs and projects of the Midwest Consortium for Black Studies. The consortium consists of a select group of research and teaching faculty at MSU, the University of Michigan, the University of Wisconsin, and Carnegie Mellon University. Michigan State University will use its share of the grant to support the development of African American Studies programs at the undergraduate and graduate level, and will support the creation of a PhD program in African American Studies. This grant recognizes MSU's outstanding leadership in the emerging field of African American Studies, said Curtis Stokes, Associate Professor in James Madison College. This mass of faculty expertise and student interest here, and with new academic programs and the national reputation of the biennial Race in 21st Century America Conference. So if there was one person that I had to point to that laid the foundation and the groundwork that teased the philanthropic foundation's interest in giving money to Michigan State University, it was Curtis Stokes. So let's give Curtis Stokes a round of applause. Stokes will administer the grant in partnership with Darlene Clark So I just want to stand up here and tell you how much I appreciated your service, intellectual contributions to Michigan State University, and how much I appreciated your willingness to work with me when I came here. You reached out to me from day one, and I didn't have to wear a shirt and tie either, but I had a nice dress on. And we just sort of talked about the things that we would like to see created here. And you talked about this race conference. And you made a tremendous intellectual, emotional, investment in launching this conference. And I think that if, after all is said and done, the reputation that Michigan State enjoys abroad, out in the academic universe, is in large part due to the fact that you persevered, you raised the money, you begged the president. President Simon even came to me, what is going on? I said, just give him the money. And you put Michigan State on the intellectual map. And as I travel around the country, one of the things that people always commented on was the race conference at Michigan State University. And I was always so proud to be your colleague. And I wanted just to stand up here and thank you for the volumes you edited after the race conferences. Sometimes I helped you with them. And you always invited me to participate in one way or the other. You were very gracious, and you supported my students. All of those doctoral students that we brought in for the Comparative Black History PhD program, you were always welcoming to the graduate students. I have never met a graduate student who said Curtis Stokes was mean to me, or Curtis Stokes didn't listen to me. Now, Curtis Stokes may not have put you on the program that you wanted to be on and decided that you should be on. We can't be perfect. But I just want to say, Curtis Stokes, that you have indeed transformed Michigan State University. You have enhanced the reputation of this institution, and you have challenged all of us to be vigorous, rigorous, fearless intellectuals. And for that, I sincerely thank you and praise you. And may God and the force be with you.
How you feeling?
Better.
Better.
Rising.
All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we are here to celebrate the retirement of Professor Curtis Stokes. But there's another purpose why we are gathered here tonight. An endowment is being created in Professor Stokes' name to advance his legacy. And Curtis determined that the purpose of the endowment, working with the college, and that would be Dean Garnett and Rocky, they decided how the endowment was going to be set up. They're going to provide an annual prize to a James Madison student, also combining studies with the Department of African American Studies. And it will provide funds for activities and programs in Black radical theory, like the Race Conference. And of course, the name of the program of the endowment is the Curtis Stokes Endowment for Black Radical Thought at JMC and MSU. Thus far, there are commitments totaling $51,000 from 9 employers to the endowment. And I think at the registration table, I don't know, where's Rocky? Okay. Registration table, there are pledge forms, information about the endowment and how you can contribute. Rocky will certainly be happy to take everything down for you. And if you want to see Professor Stokes' legacy continue, and I think it would be a wonderful gesture for you to contribute and pledge to this wonderful endowment. And kind of have this man's work continue. So, with that, Katie, are you ready?
You're gonna say something about Boston?
Oh, of course. A little change in the program. Dr. Robert Green is not going to be here tonight. There was a family emergency, so he was not able to get back east. So just wanted everybody to know that if they're wondering where Dean Green is, that's where he is. So, Kate. You know, that screen is just, I don't know.
So, Curtis, this was going to be another little transition in the program. We brought it a little closer to your home in the college. And Bob Green was a founder of the college, and so it's sad that he can't be here. He sent his love, and I know he's spoken about you in public before. But we're going to bring this close to the college. Our next speaker, Louis Hunt, a member of the political theory and constitutional democracy field, moderated today's discussion, but couldn't really go into depth about his experience with Curtis in a field of study together of political theory, which is near and dear to all that you do. And Louis is a student of German social and political thought, but not so much of Marxist. He's written on Kant, Hegel, and Habermas, as well as the Scottish Enlightenment and problems of civil society. This could seem to those of you not political theorists out here pretty far reach from the orientation of the favorite scholar of Trotsky's theory of democracy and permanent revolution. But they do share an interest in the problems of liberal democracy. And together, as Louis described in this afternoon's program, he and Curtis developed and taught a special topics course on race and justice. And this was not announced yet, but like Curtis, he has reached outside the United States to understand the problems within. Indeed, as someone deeply interested in multiculturalism, I remember Louis Hunt learning Sanskrit in order to study ancient Indian texts to be true to the complexity of multiculturalism. And in the wake of this research, he lectured at the Central Institute for Higher Tibetan Studies in Samath, India, during the 2008 financial crisis. It's hard for you to probably think, well, how does this connect to Curtis Stokes' life and work? But at that meeting, the Tibetans, both monastic and lay, argued on Buddhist grounds that capitalism must be bad, because it encourages the development of unnecessary desires. In Lewis's own words, how right they were. So there you have it. 2 PTCDs, semi-kindred spirits.
Well, I may not be as far from Marx as Katie suggested, but I wanted to say something about Curtis's sartorial style. I spent the day trying to find a t-shirt that would still fit me, because I thought I should wear a windbreaker and a t-shirt in honor of Professor Stokes. Unfortunately, nobody rocks a t-shirt like Professor Stokes. So I just thought, no way can I possibly even compete with this man. As Katie noted, and I've talked a little bit about this today, Curtis and I developed a course together on race and justice, which we co-taught in the spring of December of 2017, I believe. And when I say we developed it together, what I really mean is that for a couple of years, we talked about it, until finally Curtis said, look, we either do this, or we've got to stop talking about it. And so we put it together, and Curtis was really the main impetus behind it. I see at least one student from that course. And he did a lot of the research and the creation of the syllabus, but we talked a lot together about how we were going to approach it, how we were going to divide up our duties. It turned out that it was directed towards freshmen and sophomores, and because we didn't have as much time as we wanted to advertise it, we only had 10 students sign up for it, which ordinarily, a 5-to-1 ratio makes good sense to me. It doesn't make that much sense to the budget officer of a college or university, but Sherm Garnett was really generous and said, this is a really important project, and we're going to go with it. And it turned out we had 10 excellent students, and it was really an extraordinary experience, and I think Curtis and I would just enjoyed teaching it. But you know, I thought I would tell you a few stories about the course. And to do that, I went back and I looked at our SIRS forms. These are the student evaluations, and we got joint SIRS forms. And since the students were so good, they actually wrote a lot. But some of what they wrote was, you know, a little bit surprising to me. One thing they talked a lot about was how important the interaction between the two of us was in this course. I mean, it really made a difference. And, you know, at the risk of self-praise for both of us, I'm going to read a couple of these statements and comment on them. The first one says, the course was very insightful, and the theorist's position was very interesting. The professors always challenged the student discussions, playing devil's advocate on different issues. And this was really true. At Curtis's insistence, we read some selections from Milton Friedman's capitalist screed, Capitalism and Freedom, something I would not have done, and Curtis took the lead in discussing this. But then he goes on and says, the tag team between Professor Hunt and Professor Stokes was the best, the EST capital letters, class experience of my entire life. Well, that's really nice, but I realized I wasn't quite sure what a tag team was. You know, it could be an esoteric term for table tennis, so far as I was concerned. So I went online. I went to an online Merriam-Webster online dictionary, and it turns out that the term tag team comes from professional wrestling, which really makes sense because professional wrestlers and college professors are species of the same genus, actors. You know, to be a good professional wrestler, you have to know how to bluff, you have to know how to fake, you have to know how to appear to be winning and how to appear to be losing. And essentially, you know, it's not surprising to me then that there's a connection here. But here's the definition. A tag team is a team of 2 or more professional wrestlers who spell each other during a match. In other words, one wrestler will fight while the other person is in the corner recovering, and then they'll switch again. And that's exactly what we did in this class. You know, Professor, I would be talking for 15 minutes, go back to my seat, chest heaving with the exertion, trying to overcome student inertia, apathy, and ignorance. And then, you know, Professor Stokes would jump in, and he would do it for about 15 minutes. He started fading, and then I would jump in. And every once in a while, we'd let the students get a word in edgewise. But really, I think perhaps that was not the intention of the student, because the next more sober definition of a tag team is two or more people working in association toward the same goal, and I think that was appropriate. Now, the other comment that struck me was this. Again, I'm quoting, perhaps with a bit of poetic license here, a student's comments. The course being taught by both Hunt and Stokes offered a very unique experience. I particularly appreciated the chemistry between the two men. The word chemistry here did puzzle me a little bit, because I tend to think of it as one of the definitions is a strong mutual attraction, attachment, sympathy, all true enough, although there were no real sparks flying. I also thought, what kind of impression were we giving these students? Was this some kind of romantic comedy, like When Harry Met Sally? And if so, which one of us was supposed to be Meg Ryan? You get that joke, by the way, you really are dating yourself. So again, I was a little bit puzzled by this. But dictionaries are useful. So dig deeper, you can see what people are really saying. And the next definition of chemistry is an interaction between people working together. Specifically, such interaction when harmonious or effective. And I think that's really the case. I should say that was the case for the class as a whole. We all know, as teachers, those of us who are teachers, what a class with good chemistry is, and we certainly had that. I just want to tell one last anecdote about the class. After it was over, one of the best students in this very good class came up to me and said, well, we figured out, Professor Hunt, after a while, that you guys weren't letting us know where you really stood on anything. You were playing devil's advocate. So we spent a lot of time trying to figure out where you actually stood, what your real views were. And we think we figured it out. And I said, really? Naturally, I said, well, what about me? I prefer not to say. And then I said, well, what about Professor Stokes? This long pause saying, he was a hard nut to crack. But this, I'm not making this up. The young woman said, isn't Professor Stokes one of those people who are economic conservatives? Sort of free market oriented, but socially liberal. I said, you mean like Milton Friedman? Yeah, more or less like Milton Friedman. So what could I say? I said, you've hit the nail on the head. Of course, I added under my breath with the wrong side of the hammer. And I handed her a copy of Isaac DeWitcher's biography of Leon Trotsky and said, read. In any case, I would like to say, Curtis, these last few years where we really got to know each other well, and this course came out of it, it's just been great. And I'm just speaking one-to-one, and as one professor to another, but also as a friend to a friend, I really value that. And I am going to miss you, and I hope you'll be hanging around Case Hall as you usually do. And also, I hope you're still going to wear your t-shirt. Okay? Thank you.
Thanks, Louis. So after decades at Michigan State University, I think I can say that one of the characteristics of this university is that it's really a set of silos, of academic silos. And people live and work in their silo. And it produces a kind of intellectual and social isolation. There's a college here, there's a college there. And it is only because there are ambassadors and people who move between these colleges. The first is our students, who challenge us to move out of our silos. The second is not our colleagues, who mostly inhabit these silos. But there are brave and intrepid people who move between them. This is Curtis Stokes. And so what you've been hearing is the outcome of someone who has had the courage and maybe the necessity as an only black scholar to move out of this silo and into the broader university and back again. Lynn Scott, who is speaking next, is another example of this kind of migratory intellectual. She retired from Madison College, where for many years she taught in the first year program, both in public affairs and in the humanities, culture and writing courses, but she also taught for many years in ATL for the broader students in the university. And after she left the college, in the residential college in the arts and humanities. So this is a person who knows the university. She has written extensively about James Baldwin. Really, she's a terrific Baldwin scholar, including a book on his later fiction. Really interesting to think about his later fiction and how he positioned himself in a changing racial and political landscape. And a really marvelous book on the influence of Baldwin on the writings of Toni Morrison. So thank you, Lynn, for migrating around this university. She's co-editing with Curtis the forthcoming Incarceration and Race in Michigan, grounding the national debate in state practice. How important can that be? So, Lynn.
I guess I'm kind of migratory. I also worked at the College of Human Medicine, so. Well, let me just start by saying to you, Curtis, welcome to the world of retirement. For me, retirement has offered the opportunity to migrate, to do new things, as well as to continue to work on those things that are most important to me, one of which has certainly been working with you over the past few years. I'm really honored to be here to help celebrate your important contributions to Michigan State University, and more broadly, your contributions to our understanding of African American politics and of the Black radical tradition. When I first started working at James Madison College, I knew you by name and by the reputation you'd already built, especially with the race conferences that began in 1999 and have continued every other year to this time. Through these conferences, you not only helped educate MSU students, but the larger community about the ongoing impacts of racial inequality in America. I have loved the way these conferences not only bring in nationally renowned experts, but have extended beyond the walls of academia to include various professionals, activists, concerned citizens, and youth, not only as part of the audience, but as participants in the conferences themselves. The conferences are a model of collaboration intended to transform knowledge into action. As you wrote in your statement of purpose in the program for the 2011 Conference on Race and the Criminal Justice System, you said, at a minimum, it is hoped that attendees will use ideas generated at the Race in the 21st Century America Conference to help organize and mobilize their own neighborhoods and challenge and educate legislators and other elected and non-elected public officials to be more responsive to the needs of ordinary residents, especially the worst off among them. So for the last few years, Curtis and I have worked on a book born out of this 2011 conference and the one following it, where Michelle Alexander, author of Mass Incarceration in the Age of Colorblindness, was the keynote speaker. Our book, Incarceration and Race in Michigan, Grounding the National Debate in State Practice, comes out this December 1st, so look for it, everybody. I'm pleased to say that the book reflects the spirit of the conferences, bringing together multiple forms of knowledge. The book's design is truly a collaboration between Curtis, the political scientist, and me, the humanities scholar. There is a greater public awareness today of the problems with the American criminal justice system than there was even just a decade ago. I remember when I started teaching a course on mass incarceration, and students were just like shocked. What? We, lock up 5 times as many people as any other country in the world? People aren't so shocked when they hear that anymore. There is more awareness, and hopefully this book will help continue to increase that growing awareness, as well as outline suggestions for how change can be made. I think it's a book that appeals to both the head and the heart, because we know that changing the criminal justice system requires changing the public's beliefs and attitudes about criminals, criminality, and race. I'm looking forward to the release of our book in December. Thank you so much, Curtis, for this opportunity to have worked with you on this project. And again, welcome to the world of retirement.
How you doing now?
Really good.
All right, great, great. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I just kind of want to acknowledge some people in the room. All of you have heard about Professor Stokes' accomplishments in establishing graduate programs, and the race conference, and all of the work that he's done. But in my mind, and I suppose that's because I first met you when you first came. In my mind, he is a teacher, and he loves to teach students. And that is truly, I think, his first love. I don't know, maybe he'll tell us something differently. We'll see. I do want to acknowledge this table right here, where the current members, some of the members of the W.E.B. Du Bois Society are right here. Why don't you guys stand up? Professor Stokes, I know, has served as their advisor at various points. I don't know if you're are you currently the advisor?
Oh, no, I'm not an advisor right now.
Okay.
However, I have been advisor, in several weeks or so.
All right, okay.
Yeah, oh yeah.
And I guess I do want to say to the students, some of who I had a chance to meet last night, you're having the opportunity to see Professor Stokes' legacy, and the alums, his colleagues, you guys are a part of that. And I would say to you students that you have to carry the torch and make sure that his work continues, but maybe even more importantly, make sure that there are other Black tenure stream professors to come down the pipe. We expect you to carry this torch. And I think he expects you to carry this torch as well. Now, we'll change gears just a little bit. I'm going to introduce our next speaker. You ready? We'll see. Okay, well, it is my pleasure to introduce the Honorable Judge Jeffrey Cummings. And I I really better stick to the script because Jeff and I were roommates for 3 years. And Jeff is like one of my brothers in the room, okay? I think we probably talk weekly, at least. And so he has enough dirt on me that I better be good here what I say. But in any event, Judge Jeffrey Cummings is a United States Magistrate Judge in the Northern District of Illinois. And he was sworn in on January 29th of this year. Just this year. On a personal note, I had the pleasure of attending Jeff's investiture ceremony. And it really kind of took me back to when we were in school, back in the early 80s. We kind of, talked offhandedly. I don't know, I can't remember the full context. I think we were having maybe a bad day or we were having a difficult class or something. And, we talked about, we said, well, one day we'll both be judges and none of this will matter. So that actually has happened. But prior to taking the bench this year, Jeff spent nearly 30 years at Minor Barnhill and Gallon, where he became an associate there in 1989. He earned frequent accolades and accomplishments, and he was a co-managing partner of the firm right up until the time he became judge. He represented individuals and organizations in federal and state civil cases involving employment discrimination, civil rights, whistleblower claims, tort claims, general commercial disputes. He represented labor clients, personal injury arbitrations, trial counsel. And this is something, I think I knew about this at the time, but I don't think you ever actually told me this. That he was an attorney on the longest Voting Rights Act trial in history, 51-day trial. And he served as lead counsel in many appellate cases in front of the Court of Appeals, the 7th Circuit Court of Appeals, the Illinois Supreme Court, all the appellate courts in Illinois. Jeff was an administrative hearing officer for the City of Chicago's Commission on Human Relations. He was a hearing officer for the Chicago Police Board, and he has received numerous awards, excellence in pro bono service by the court that he now serves, and he was selected as one of the leading lawyers in civil rights and constitutional law. He's a member of the National Black Lawyers Top 100. He was an Illinois super lawyer. He was the president of the Chicago Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights under Law, and he was on their board of directors for over a decade. Jeff received his law degree from Northwestern University, and of course he is a James Madison graduate in 2 courses that don't exist. Minority majority, right? And urban, right? Okay, so those, I don't know what those are called now, I can't keep up, every 10 years it changes. But without further ado, we call up Judge Jeffrey Cummings.
Good evening, everyone. I want to thank Herm, I call him Herm, for that very gracious introduction. I told him to try and keep things short about me because really tonight is about Professor Dr. Stokes. And I do, when I was asked to speak, I thought about him, and this happens to me when I really care about someone. But I thought about him as a person who is an expander of minds, a generator of opportunity, and a giver of self. He has given more to others than he would ever have asked or sought from us. And he's done it all, as Dr. Perro said, with the humbleness. I mean, you would never know that this man sitting here has done all these things that we've been talking about here tonight. He goes about his business in a way that just is, it's really old school. The sort of people that I knew growing up and leaders that I had and instructors and people that I watched, they did their thing and they did it with excellence. They didn't have to brag. They didn't have to go on Twitter. They lifted people up. They lifted people up. They didn't cut others down. And that's him. I mean, I remember when we were here at James Madison, Herman and I, June, and others, Ruth, folks that were here, with King and Val. We were so happy to have him come because we had no African American faculty, as Professor Singh mentioned. We were all very excited and really pulling for you to make it and to establish yourself, because you know what it was like here before he came was like an orchestra without a brass section. There's a lot of beautiful music coming, but there's something missing. There's a voice that's missing. And he provided a critical voice for our college, for our university, and as we've heard here tonight, really for our nation. I remember going to that first race conference, I think that's what it was called then, around about 1998. I remember sitting in the hall and just saying, I can't believe we're having this here at Michigan, a race conference at Michigan State. I mean, it blew my mind that was able to take place, and to see how it has prospered and developed and continued over the years is really quite a testament to you. Now, my experience with Dr. Stokes lasted long after I graduated from James Madison. In 1997, because I feel I owe this college a lot in terms of where I am right now, developed a scholarship in the name of my parents, and what it is an essay contest for first-year students coming in, new students coming in. And what I wanted to do was to pose to them public policy questions that would be difficult for them to write essays on, and then we would award a winner. And so we picked topics like affirmative action in academia and in college admissions. We do things like, should there be a metropolitan school district in Detroit so that every student can pick the best school to go to, not be bound by the boundaries of their municipality. Felon voting rights. Should they be able to vote after they get out of prison? Things that I know that most of these students who were looking at these questions had never even given a thought to. And Professor Stokes and Professor C, while she was here, every year we read through all these essays and we collaborate and decide the winner. And you know, we always had some very good students. There were a lot of things though that we saw that were very troubling. Just a snapshot of the state of mind of the incoming students in James Madison. There was a lot of need for expansion of mind. I'll leave it at that on some of these issues. And in the course of our collaboration, you know, we talked about voting rights, and we talked about some of the things that I've done, and then Professor Stokes, he suggested, well, maybe you should put something together for the policy course. Maybe you should come back. And I was like, really? I mean, I can never imagine doing that when I was here to present to this group. But we worked together, we put together a presentation on the impact of the Voting Rights Act in North Carolina, where there's been a lot of very leading case law, a lot of struggles there to make sure that everyone has an equal opportunity to vote in that state. And I came back and with him by my side, literally, got up there and gave a lecture. And I think one thing that tells me is, when someone else believes that you can do something, you start believing that yourself. And so for a moment, I became a college professor, like many other people in this room, and I was able to channel that and feel his strength. But I'll just close you off with this. I mean, I think, Professor Stokes, you are a person of honor, of strength, of integrity, and I will always treasure having the opportunity to know you and to work with you and to have you in my life. Thank you very much.
All right.
Yes.
You feeling okay?
Yeah.
All right. Well, it is my pleasure to introduce our next speaker. She is a James Madison College alum. She is from my hometown, Flint, Michigan. Flint people, please. Are you in the house? Tracy Sherrod is an editorial director at HarperCollins Publishers, the #2 publisher in the world. She runs the Amistad imprint, which is the premier publisher of African American literature, with Pulitzer Prize winner Edward P. Jones on the list, as well as National Book Award winners Jacqueline Woodson, Man Booker Prize winner Paul Beatty, and multiple NAACP Image Awards. Days after she graduated from James Madison College, she headed to New York with $65 in her pocket. She was scammed out of $5 by the time she reached her aunt's apartment in Washington Heights. She had an internship at the Feminist Press by day and a job at the Doubleday bookstore by night. A month later, she was finally able to find a studio apartment in Harlem, where she still lives. And the place was small enough where, I'm not from New York, we're from Flint. But they have these apartments, where you can turn the stove on and flush the toilet and without, turn the lights on without even moving. But Tracy considered herself a part of the Harlem Renaissance because she lived there and she secretly planned to reestablish the Harlem Renaissance. She says that gentrification is challenging now. Is that true? I hear you gotta have a lot of money to live there now. Yeah. Well, another Flint Harlemite, sitting over there. We'll have to ask him about that. This year, Tracy published a James Madison student's memoir, The Love Prison. And a wonderful book signing in the James Madison Library earlier today. So I don't know, some of you hopefully, we'll have to tell everybody where to go. You can get it on Amazon or everything, right? Everywhere. Available everywhere. This year also, her fall 2019 book She is going to publish Diamond Doris, True Story of an International Jew Thief. Rakim, the greatest rap lyricist of all time on writing, creativity. And she's publishing Trayvon Martin's attorney, Ben Crump's Open Season. I know him. He's a good guy.
I'm glad you know.
He's a good guy. She's also, well, I don't know, she definitely wants me to talk about the fact that she's published and I have not, I'm gonna have to read this now, you know.
I'm gonna get there. I think you're going on.
Oh, come on. You don't want me to talk about Korean stuff? Now, come on now. Come on now. She's been featured in the New York Times, Publishers Weekly, Essence, Ebony, Washington Post, Village Voice, and on Bookspan. Right? So she's been. All right. All right. Well, without further ado.
Thank you so much, Ruben. You know, this is about you, Professor Stokes. And you know, I'm a modest little lady, but you know, I fell in love with you for the first time I saw you. The sideburns and the boots. And this is no disrespect to you, I understand. And I was like, I just fell in love. And then, when you opened your mouth and all the things you were saying, because you know, you were the first Black teacher I had in my entire education. So to walk in the course and see you and all of this, you know, I fell down the rabbit hole. I was like, yes. And I would listen to everything and hung on every word and read everything that you recommended and then expanded beyond that, because the more information I learned from you, the more I wanted to know. And I read lots of things all the time because, you know, and then after being around you, taking your course and everything, you know, I wanted to be a philosopher. I was like, you know, I don't know where anybody would, you know, hire me to do that. So, but you know, I continued to pursue this throughout the rest of my college, you know, career about being a philosopher. And then it comes time to graduate, and my roommate, college roommate, Maria Lattis, who was also the president of the class, she said, well, what are you gonna do with the rest of your life? I said, well, you know, I wouldn't tell her out loud that I wanted to be a philosopher, so I said, I hadn't thought about it. I don't know. I just love reading and writing, so I don't know. And she says, well, you're always reading and writing. Why don't you call up those people and ask them for a job? So I'm like, what people? And she's like, you know, the book people. And so I happened to have a book in my hand at the time. And back then, there was a telephone number in there, you know. So I called up the Feminist Press. And they said, sure, you can have a job. Louise de Burkhorst, I still remember her, the phone call, everything. She said, sure. I said, yeah. And she goes, yeah, when would you like to start? And so I said, well, I graduate then, so I'll be in New York. I could be in New York on I remember this date, September 27th. And so, you know, I packed all my stuff and I went. And when I got there, that's when I found out I was too scared to ask how much I made because I didn't want her to like not hire me. You know, this is the Black thing, you know, you never ask about that. And so, at least back then. So I went, but I ended up with a $50 a week internship. And so, you know, you can't make it on New York, you know, plus I only have the $60 left now, and so I got a job at night, and so, you know, I was happy, you know, I worked in the bookstore, and I got to, you know, feel the books every day, look at them, read them, everything, so, you know, it's just like being like a little heaven to me. And then eventually, you know, things progressed, you know, my career, and I decided, let me go out and venture out into mainstream book publishing and see if I could get a job. And that's when I learned that in the 1980s, they believed that Black people didn't read. And so I was like, they don't know Professor Stokes. I'm like, what's wrong with these people? The whole industry thought this. So it took me 7 years to get a job as an editorial assistant. And, but you know, I still didn't care because that was my passion. I got the books. Oh my God, and then now I get some free books too. So it's just amazing and wonderful, and a lot of hard work. And one of the things I always remembered from your class, Professor Stokes, was when you asked the question, if you mix your labor with the land, do you own what you create? Does anybody remember this question? I mean, I'm paraphrasing. I never forgot that because, you know, I still think about it all the time, every day. And in class, I thought, that day when you asked that question, I thought, well, if I created a gun, I could probably take everything else that everybody has. You know, mixing their labor with the land. And then I was thinking, that's what happened. That is what has happened in this world, I think. And so, I keep thinking about this question. I think about it all the time in every aspect and from every angle and from this and that. And the results of it, what I see what people have. When you mix your land with your labor, do you get to keep it, or does somebody steal it? All these other, you know, type of things that, you know, impact with capitalism. But I think the good part is that I keep asking the question and keep turning it around and keep wondering about it. Because I think part of your legacy, one of the most important things I believe that you've given us is the ability to think critically. And so we never really take anything for granted, and we keep asking questions. And I think that you have raised like a generation of disciples. So we're gonna go out there, we're gonna find all the answers, we're gonna make all the change, and we're gonna do all of that with you in our mind and you in our hearts forever. And thank you for everything.
Doing all right? Yes. Okay. All right. Just a housekeeping matter. At the end of the program, we are going to do some photographs. We want to have a picture of all the Black alumni that we're going to be presenting to you. We're going to get it blown up and present it to you. So you can, in your retirement, gaze at it and say, those are my kids, that's my legacy. And also, for some of the students that are here, some of the alumni, we're going to go over to the Harrison Roadhouse, and we want to have the opportunity to interact with you guys. So you're welcome to join us, and we'll do that for a while, and then we'll probably in Michigan State style kick you out and drink a little bit. But to move on to our next speaker, my other brother. Well, not quite. You're not quite the last speaker. We are also going to, after Kermit speaks, open it up to the audience. We have those cordless mics, so we're going to run around like Bill Donahue or Oprah or something like that. Some of you don't even Phil Donahue. All right, Oprah ran him out of Chicago. Anyway, we're going to run around, and if anybody has a few words that they want to say to Professor Stokes, then you will have that opportunity. It's not just all of us on the program. So, let me introduce the next speaker, who also has dirt on me. My other brother for almost 4 decades now, also from Flint, Mr. Kermit Brooks. He is an attorney, and he serves as general counsel of AXA Equitable Life in New York City. And he's a member of the AXA Equitable Holdings, Management Committee. He's responsible for the oversight of the law department, including corporate compliance, insurance funds, funds management, government relations practice groups. Prior to being promoted to general counsel, that was this summer, wasn't that? Okay, great promotion here, general counsel. No, really, seriously. You work very hard. Prior to joining AXA Equitable, Kermit was the first deputy superintendent and acting superintendent for the New York State Insurance Department. He also served as a deputy attorney general in New York for operations at the office of the New York State Attorney General. And I know he also served in the New York Governor's administration too. Is that correct? All right. He began his career as a commercial litigation associate at Nixon, Hargraves, Jefferson, Doyle. And he is on the board of the National Organization of Life and Health Insurance Guarantee Associations, the Association of Life Insurance Council, and the Insurance Federation of New York. Kermit is a graduate of the University of Michigan Law School. And of course, he has his bachelor's in international relations from good old James Madison College. So at this time, please welcome Kermit.
Two things. One, I'm so glad that my core major has not changed. It's still Thank Professor C. and Herm and all of the James Madison team for such a wonderful event tonight. From Herman's recital of my bio, I owe very special thanks to Professor Stokes. I was in his first class, and after my first grade, my first critique of an essay, I decided to abandon academia and become a practitioner. And so that's what I've done. But we've heard a lot about Professor Stokes' ideas and how he's influenced all of us. And as someone who went a different path than many here in the room who pursued academia, I think the one thing that has impressed me, Dr. Stokes, is that you were the first Black professor that I had who stood in judgment of my intellect and really challenged me to think critically. But more important than that, you were a pioneer. And I think that when I look at all of us in here, I think that you taught us that. We've learned and talked about your ideas all day today, but what has resonated with me is your journey. That you have blazed a trail with dignity, grace, tenacity, and perseverance that we've all emulated. It's very easy to succeed when things go well, but it's even more of an achievement to overcome adversity, setback, and challenges. And that's what you've done in your career. And you've taught us that. And I think that the greatest legacy for you is, in addition to your scholarship, is us. We are a living legacy of your achievements here at Michigan State. And I have a quote from one of your favorite philosophers, Franz Fanon. It says, Franz Fanon. Well, you see what okay. It says, what matters is not the world, what matters is not to know the world, but to change it. And when you look at what Professor Stokes has done over his 36-year journey, you've changed the world through us. And I want to thank you for that, because the role model that you've set for me as a 19-year-old Black boy when I was here in college has made me the man I am today. And I want to thank you.
Before we hear from the man of the hour, you're gonna talk to us tonight?
Well, I'm willing to.
Oh, no, just a second. We don't want to hog everything, so if there's anybody out in the audience who wants to take a minute or two to say a couple of words to Dr. Stokes, I'm going to run over there like old Fry. Try to hear what you're going to say.
My name is Ruth Johnson. I'm a 1983 graduate of JMCD, Justice, Morality, and Constitutional Democracy. So unfortunately, I did not have the opportunity to learn under Dr. Stokes, but I want to talk a little bit about the journey pre-Stokes. What many of us here did, and we're so thankful it bore fruit and continues to bear fruit, that our labors were not in vain. So, we were in, I remember distinctly, the Black Culture Room on the 3rd floor, and Londa's Lane, a fellow graduate, her brother did a wonderful mural, and that was our safe space, our hangout place, and we strategized about getting a Black tenure-track professor. I do want to lift up, Professor Stokes was not the first. I want to lift up Ruth and Prime, who was the first. Unfortunately, he died in a trip to the Caribbean. So we had high hopes. So some of you may not know, the students put an ad in the Chronicle of Higher Education. We solicited resumes, did phone interviews. We promised to provide research assistance, financial help,
I'm not gonna say nothing, but I ain't doing that.
emotional, spiritual support, because we knew the journey would not be easy.
I get stove up. I'm sorry. I just have to stand up.
Okay, please.
So,
Let me turn around, kind
but
of.
part of the reason we were able to mobilize was the great coursework we had here on statistical analysis, so we could get EEOC reports and compare James Madison with other departments and colleges and other universities. But also another key factor, I was talking to Professor Dorr, was when they were trying, they threatened to close Madison, and the students and the faculty and the staff came together. So we knew a little bit about organizing. But the fight did not end.
I just want to roll around. That's all right?
They denied me tenure
I
the
just
first
want to
time
back and
around.
forth. I'll turn right now.
Now we are law students and
I'm
lawyers.
walking out.
And we organized again, people at this table, Judge Jefferson, Kermit, a lot of us. And we did what we had to do to ensure that he would get tenure. But one of the reasons I knew a little bit about that tenure fight is my mother, Dr. Georgia Johnson. While I was here at Madison, she was denied tenure from the College of Human Medicine. And she filed a sex and race discrimination suit against the university. And yes, I was her law clerk, because in her words, why should I pay someone else's child to do their research? But I learned about the tenure system. I learned how to get the evidence, analyze the evidence. But we also strategized because many of us worked or interned at the legislature. We knew how, and another thing we strategized, and many of you remember, we decided to get a Black Madison on every college and university board or commission. And as a student, I heard discrimination suits on the anti-discrimination board from staff, faculty, and students. I basically was a judge as an undergraduate. So I just want to thank all of my fellow alumni, the current students, because our struggle and our journey brought Professor Stokes to us. And I think we should applaud ourselves for the work we did, but also give full credit for Professor Stokes to remain steadfast. Even when it got weary, when it got difficult, he was on everybody's committee. Every single committee. People say that's positive. I never saw it as a positive. To be on everybody's committee every time.
So thank you for what you did, but thank you to my fellow Madisonians who worked hard.
Thank you. Is there anybody else? Okay. All right.
I'm Shajuti. I teach in Madison. So when I came here, I work on Marxian class analysis, and I was told that I will be seen as a dinosaur in the US of A academia. But when I first proposed the course on class matters, I couldn't find the books that I wanted. I was 2 weeks away from starting the class. I had heard that Professor Stokes was a Marxist or is a Marxist, and I knocked on his door. He opened the door, and I told him that my class is just 2 weeks away. I desperately need a book for the concepts on Marxism. And then he showed me the cupboard, and there were just Tom Pottermore and Marxism and Macklin and everything that I thought of, and I realized that I'm not a dinosaur. It was such a moment of relief. And like a few months later, my book came out, and it's actually called Class and Politics and da-da-da-da-da. But when he saw the cover, he said, "Oh, you have written a book on class. This is such an important work." And it was so important. He gave me the warmest hug ever. I came here thinking I would be an outsider, but at that moment, I found someone who thought my work was important. So far away from home, so far away from my teachers and my colleagues and my friends. This was a really special moment. That hug would be with me for a very long time. Thank you, Professor Stokes.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Gene Burns, a colleague of Curtis's. I just wanted to mention one thing that Curtis and I kind of bonded over, talking in the hallways, because he's a committed Marxist, he's a Trotskyist, on a personal level. He's such a humble guy. So what we bonded over is, occasionally we sort of say to each other, aren't we lucky? I think Curtis came from challenging conditions, given the oppression of this country. I came from much less challenging, but not an academic or college background at all in my family. And we still look around and think, we get paid all this money, and we study what we like, and we teach great students. And so Curtis, very much appreciates just the wonders of his life.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Professor Dorr.
I'm not only old school, I'm old. I will turn 80 at my next birthday. I've known Curtis since he first came here. And a couple things that I would add to what people said is that we really appreciated his commitment to policy. At that particular point, people all in Madison had to teach first-year courses, either in the writing program or in the policy book. And I think you even wanted to be in charge of the policy course at one time. I'll say this also in my own way, and that is, I think Curtis is first of all a teacher of students, and second of all, a teacher of subjects. And I think there is a difference between that. Third, I would say to you that he's one of the very first people, one of the only people who I have had intelligent communications, talks with him about Marxism and the Bible. He knows, for instance, that the phrase, each according to his need, each according to his ability, comes from the New Testament.
That's right.
Not from Marx. And he has been a model of renewal. Freud once was asked, what should a person be able to do well in life? To work well and to love well. To renew well, I believe, is also involves living well in that regard. And the last thing I want to say is second to the last, is you don't have to go to Woody's also. You can go over to the dairy store and have ice 2 hours of conversation.
As we do.
As we have done much of our lives. The last thing I want to do is to say, he is above all a friend. And that can run the gamut from what most friendships start with people as strangers, as acquaintances, and then move to companions and comradeship, and finally can reach a certain kind of intimacy, a communion of real soulmates. And so I want to read to you a poem that I think has 2 or 3 important truths about friendship. And it's going to take you back 1,200 years to Po Chi Ai, who was 35 when he wrote to his friend Yuan Chen, who was 22. And the poem goes like this. 7 years I have lived in Chang'an. What have I gained? Only you, Yuan. So hard it is to bind friendships fast. We have roamed on horseback under the flowering trees. We have walked in the snow and warmed our hearts with wine. We have met and parted at the western gate, and neither of us bothered to put on cap or belt. We were not serving in the same Department of State. The bonds that joined us lay deeper than outward things. The rivers of our souls spring from the same well. Curtis, thank you very, very much, not only for touching our minds, but for touching our hearts and our souls.
Thank you, Professor Williams. Okay.
Do you want me to bring the mic to you?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. We're going to speak from there. Ladies and gentlemen, the man of the hour, Professor Dr. Curtis Stokes.
Well, the first thing I want to say is that I'm really interested in certainly the first well, it's an introduction, okay? And what I want to say is that the first class, okay, of Michigan State University around 1930s and earlier, okay? And the students who first came here and worked with me, okay, and you with them, with us, okay, and I think that the students were really interested in getting faculty, okay, from elsewhere, and so they recruited me, okay. They look, Herman and the rest of them, the faculty, the worst of the, I'm sorry, the early students, okay, I had a large number of students in my classes, okay, very much so. And I think that helped me to think through some things that I wanted to say. And so what I want to say is I had a job talk, okay? The first time, I think it was around maybe 1983 or whatever, okay? But clearly, that group, okay, I see them all in the room here. Hey, there's Wallace Jefferson. Isn't that right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and of course, all of the others right here who have agreed to talk with me, okay? And I think that helped me because I had a very difficult time, okay? In my first 2 or 3, 4, 5 years, okay? It was really tough for me, okay? I had to get out of James Madison College for some time, but at the same time, I also am with James Madison College, okay? It's both ways, okay? The race conference is something that I did establish, okay? And that was outside of James Madison College, and Sherman knows that too, okay? I also, like some said, that I was also outside again in the sense of African American and African studies, okay? So I did that, and I also was interested and worked in James Madison College. And that's how I began to develop myself. I remember various deans in the college, okay, James Madison College, and I can say that one of the deans, who was the dean's black dean. Yeah, we had a black dean, as I said before, and that's the individual who wanted to have me at Columbia University, and of course, that dean, of course, was a preacher, and of course, some other things as well. You know, what he was. Okay, I'm not picking on him, but I'm just saying. I'm just saying that that's the way things work. His name, of course, was William Barclay, and the last name I can remember. Allen. Okay, Allen. Bill Allen was really good to me. Okay, and he was black, but I'm not saying that he has to be black. But I took that with me to Columbia University, and I first and foremost followed Manning Marable and a number of other folks as well, and I brought the kind of things back things that I had been doing, okay, and I think that when I when I heard that William Jefferson, you know, I'm talking about the President Clinton, that's right. He went back, I went back to Michigan State, and I had, I spent some time with a number of folks back at East Lansing. And I ran around the country, or the period there, and I did some things that I thought were worthy of doing, okay? And as a result of that, I think that we had some really good developments in in this area. So what I would say again, finally, is that there were a number of things that I had done, and as was said, around here, et cetera. And I think that I'm going to have to, say some things about others as well. And so it's not about black or white or blackness, or et cetera, et cetera. But I think I was, basically the only black person, other than some of the folks, about 2 or 3 others, black individuals, in those early decades, okay? And I fought like hell, okay, to work, because people were beating up on me, okay? I'm telling you, right now, beating up on me, okay? You know that, okay, exactly. And I finally got together after I got outside of James Madison College, but I was also valuing James Madison College. You see what I'm saying?
Yes.
So that's how I had to get what I wanted. And Maribel helped me out as well, okay? And a lot of others, okay? And so I think I've listened to everybody in here, and of course I've heard great commentary, okay? No question about that, okay? It's just that it's from my vantage point these days, as opposed to other days, okay? I've done a lot of things, okay? And I think some good things, okay? As people have already said here, 1-to-1, okay? And so I've had to struggle for a bit towards the end of my, where I'm standing, okay? So that's what that is. So, what I want to say is, as an end here, is that I really appreciate what I have heard, and I'm thinking that perhaps I may, obviously I'm going to end my life here in a few days or so, or something like that, but I'm not going to do that. But what I'm saying is that I'm fighting some things right now, and so that's what that is, okay? And so I'd like to say that I think I've done some things, and I'm glad to hear that others believe that I've done some good things, and I look forward to maybe a few more, maybe 30 days or so, or something like that. But no, really, because I'll have some early times as well. So I think that would be where I would want to end what I'm saying right now. Okay, trying to say right now. But I think, I like everything that I've heard. All right, thank you very much, and I look forward to doing some other things. And I'll be working with AJ Rice. Where's AJ? There's my guy right there. Don't we have something going?
Yeah, MC 300.
MC 300.
Be reading Trotsky.
What?
Be reading Trotsky.
Right. And I'll be talking about Trotsky. Okay, thank you very much. And I apologize for coming back.
We love you. We all love you.
Thank you.
Where's Sam? Sam Trump? Okay, Sam's in the back there. Why don't you come over here? Because we're going to do some photos as we talked about. And I don't want you to go too far.